playing sports, besides the normal physical benefits, are the team goals. You make friends, or you learn those social skills that you need to learn throughout your life. I think you learn teamwork. I think you learn commitment, dedication, communication. One of the things I always told my college basketball players were, I need you to be able to, when you get into the workforce, communicate with your bosses and be able to have those tough conversations. I need you to understand that on time is 10 minutes early. And I think sports gives you those life lessons that sometimes you may not get them in other realms.
Yet female athletics are constantly diminished by media representation. While men are portrayed as professionals, women are portrayed as the wholesome mother or the sexy athlete.
Sports in the 20th century, in the beginning of the 20th century, they're an area of social capital, cultural capital, economic capital, and women's exclusion from them follows pretty closely with broader inequities. Very core of gender inequity is the assumption of an immutable difference physically. So the idea that women were weaker was dominant at the time. And of course, the purpose of sports was initially to train boys and men to become better soldiers and workers, neither of which was very interesting to public education when it came to women. Initially, there are ways to discourage women from participating, and humor is one of those ways, making fun of them in the local press, making fun of them in person, mocking their attempts to perform athletically. That was very both hurtful personally for women and a way to publicly shame them. In global terms, Title IX is the most valuable piece of legislation that ensures equity in sport.
Athletics are comprised of 40% female athletes and 60% male athletes. Despite that, only 2 to 4% of sports coverage is dedicated to female athletes, with 1.4% of airtime and 3% of newspaper stories. When portrayed in the media, 25% of female athletes are sexualized compared to 5.6% of men.
When it comes to being a female in athletics, it's definitely always been a tougher road. I'd say now female athletics is really getting the recognition it deserves. But when I was younger, it was more like people didn't take female athletics as seriously. I played at Christ the King, which was a high caliber basketball team, and you can still see the difference between us who won national championships and the boys teams. And we had probably more recognition than most schools and most females, but it was always still a constant fight. I do remember one time I was coaching a men's college basketball team, and my assistant coach was a man, and the officials come to say hello to you before the game, and the first official shook my hand and my assistant's, second did the same, third shook my assistant's hand and walked away. We started laughing, the game began, and I was up coaching, my assistant was yelling from the bench just to our players, and the official who didn't shake my hand stopped the game and says, "You need to sit down." And I said, "What do you mean you need to sit down?" And he goes, "You have to sit down." And words got a little bit mixed, and I said, "Well, why?" He goes, "The head coach is the only one standing." He goes, "Who's the head coach?" And I said, "I'm the head coach," with some other words. And he turned around and went, oh. And it just goes to show, just because it was a men's team, they said, no, it couldn't have been the woman who was the head coach.
Well, now where I see, and I'm sure you guys probably do too, there are very few females in this role, in the role of athletic director. So like in Nassau County, there's maybe 10 or so of us. And in Suffolk, there's probably about the same, maybe even a little bit less. But what I see is that maybe our voices either don't get the same attention as maybe some of my counterparts, or maybe aren't taken as seriously.
I feel like, especially in women's athletics, having equal representation, like with the U.S. women's national soccer team trying to get equal pay, with the new women's national hockey league coming out, just being able to be a strong female voice in athletics and make it so that younger girls understand that whether or not you have a boundary in academics, athletics, social, personal life, that things that you learn on the competitive field are going to end up giving you those life lessons that end up giving you resiliency and the things that you're going to need to really get through a pretty male-dominated work environment or male-dominated field that you're going to start studying. And so I feel like that grit that you get on the sports field really crosses over.
People that use the market as justification for neglecting women's sports and paying them less, they'll say, well, as soon as they can bring in what the men can, then they can ask for equal pay. Well, first, that's not how labor laws work. And secondly, the men's game has tremendous investment. They were never asked to just turn a profit on a dime. In fact, they've been rescued by the government time and time again as a national good. So if that's the way that a nation approaches sports, then it's sort of the height of hypocrisy to expect women to do something differently. You know, that they're going to enter into this business, this $1 trillion business, and just sort of make their own market. That isn't really the way that it worked for men, and it isn't the way that it will work for women. And so the pay equity was very important. And yet, when the women's team lost in the 2023 World Cup, what you saw was both racist, homophobic, and sexist abuse, particularly in social media, of all of those players that fought for that. And what did people bring up? They said, oh, you should have been less interested in your wages and more interested in playing, and then maybe you could have won.
You know, it's great that we're starting to see women actually be able to make a living out of professional sports. But even if you're not using it to benefit you financially, just having that ability of that camaraderie with other women who are pushing themselves to be healthy or just reach goals, it's imperative that we get girls out into programs and pushing themselves and understanding that they don't have the same boundaries that a lot of people are going to tell them that they have. Girls in sports are going to change the world.